With the Pokemon Company revealing Surging Sparks a few weeks ahead of time, not only do we know all the rarities and therefore how much each card will cost to craft in Pokemon TCG Live, but we also have full English translations. While this is amazing, and I hope they do this for every set going forward, the downside is that the cards are all kinda low quality, so I apologize ahead of time for any blurriness and for the cards being smaller than normal. There's a lot to get to, so let's start out with the top 10 best cards coming in Surging Sparks on November 7th in PTCGL. I don't want to do this, you don't want me to do this, but I have to do this. I'll admit that Rotom isn't actually the best card in Surging Sparks, at least from a competitive standpoint, but I wanted to lead off with this because it truly is insane and will be a constant threat in Standard for the next 2.5 years. Basically, if you're a Stage 2 deck and your opponent flips over a Lightning Pokemon as their active, your feet will start sweating and you'll have to play the game completely differently lest they discard every single one of your rare candies. That's because, for a single Lightning Energy, Rotom takes a Pikachu at your opponent's hand, then you discard all of the items and tool cards you find there. It's freaking insane! Thankfully, Japanese players have mostly avoided Rotom, but if we've learned anything this year, it's that Japan is not the most accurate predictor when it comes to our meta. So don't be surprised if jerk-face Miraidon players chuck in a Rotom to hit all of your rare candies, Ultra Balls, Super Rods, Night Stretchers, Energy Switches, Energy Retrievals, Prime Catcher, Unfair Stamp, Sparkling Crystal, Forest Sealstone, and so much more. We all underestimated the power of Battle VIP Pass, then it became one of the most broken cards in Pokemon TCG history. So I want to get in on the ground floor and pretend I'm a genius if Precious Trolley ever becomes a Tier 1 A-Spec. In reality, Surging Sparks is a lot more disappointing than I originally anticipated. I'm sure once March rolls around and we lose all of the F-Block cards, including every V and V-Star, Surging Sparks will have more of an impact on the meta. But for now, the top 10 is fairly underwhelming and you can honestly jumble them all around in whatever order you wanted. Still, Precious Trolley is Battle VIP Pass on whatever Machoke takes to look that ripped. By riding the trolley, you fill up your bench with basic Pokemon. It's Arven searchable, meaning you have a great chance of having 5 bench Pokemon on turn 1 going second. Pair it with Area 0 and a Tera Pokemon like Terapagos or Pikachu or Ogerpon. Now you can grab a whopping 8 Pokemon with Precious Trolley and put them directly into play. While Latias EX definitely has its weaknesses, Snorlax Stall doesn't care while Latias itself is unlikely to ever attack, the ability is kinda busted. Put Latias EX down, now all of your basic Pokemon have free retreat. I've seen numerous lists in Japan take advantage of Latias EX, including Cloth, Miraidon, Raging Bolt, and Roaring Moon. Again, Snorlax is still a huge problem because it prevents retreating, but for everything else except Iron Thorns, Latias EX can mostly replace Switch cards, or at the very least Rescue Board. I know Magneton is getting a lot of attention with Pikachu EX for good reason, but this isn't a situation like Archeops only being good with Lugia V-Star. Magneton improves every Lightning deck, basically giving them an energy accelerating Dusclops. By knocking out Magneton, you can attach any 3 basic energy from your discard pile to your Lightning Pokemon however you want. So if you are playing Pikachu EX, it can be powered up with a single Magneton. But you can just put Magneton into a Miraidon EX deck with Iron Hands EX and Raichu V and go crazy. Not only do you get those 3 energy, but KO and your own Magneton can activate Counter Catcher, Counter Gain, and Defiance Band while also making INO stronger. You might say this card will be a ton of fun to play. At number 5, I Pikachu's Pikachu EX. Why? Well, for starters, the Resolute Heart ability means it survives a one-hit KO if Pikachu has full health. Yes, they can use Brute Bonnet Poison, or Dusclops, or Dusknoir, or Frostlass and still take 2 prizes, but against a deck like Raging Bolt EX, they don't want to see the Mighty Mouse. Powering it up isn't as difficult as it might seem either, with Magneton being the obvious partner. Blow it up, put the Grass Lightning and Metal on Pikachu, deal 300 damage. But in reality, the truest partner is Blissey EX. Thanks to its ability and its access to Glass Trumpet, you can use Blissey to power up a Pikachu EX, giving Blissey something it's been missing. A Pokemon that can take a one-hit KO. And yes, 300 damage is enough to knock out a Charizard EX thanks to Gravity Mountain. Speaking of Gravity Mountain, that gets my 6th place spot. No longer will the Stage 2 Pokemon Reign of Tyranny be left masterfully unabated. Put Gravity Mountain in play, now every Stage 2 Pokemon gets 30 less hit points, making them easier to knock out. Now someone like Raging Bolt only has to discard 4 energy to one-shot a Gardevoir EX. Or you can play a copy of Brute Bonnet, poison their Dragapult EX, and Raging Bolt needs just 4 energy to one-shot it. Or a deck like Okidogi EX now has a much easier time against Stage 2s, able to reach the all-important 300 damage with Binding Mochi. Gravity Mountain also opens up fun plays where you can heavily damage a stage 2 with someone like Zarina EX, then drop a mountain on them your next turn. And another funny thing that can happen now is that a Dusknoir can knock out another Dusknoir with Curse Blast. That will happen probably 1 out of every 1,000 games, but it doesn't change the fact that Gravity Mountain makes stage 2 decks worse and basic decks better. My favorite expanded deck when you could actually play expanded on a digital Pokemon TCG client was Volcarona V. Ceruledge EX is that on a stage 1, except better. While it only does 30 base damage, for each energy card in your discard pile, Ceruledge does 20 more damage. So with 15 energy in the bin, you're dealing 330 and one-shotting a Charizard EX. Best of all, it only requires a single fire energy to do so. This means you can run it in decks with someone like Palkia V-Star, or use Legacy Energy to potentially deny your opponent a prize card. You could also play it with Brilliant Blender, which simply discards any 5 cards from your deck. And getting that energy in the bin is easy thanks to cards like Squawkabilly, Radiant Greninja, Professor's Research, Carmine, Trekking Shoes, and Pokestop. I'll hold off on giving Brilliant Blender its own spot in the top 10 since there isn't much nuance to its effect of just discarding 5 cards from your deck. I will say that it does give Ceruledge a way to easily boost its damage by 100, or you compare it with Baby Roaring Moon or United Wings to quickly boost their damage as well. While Surging Sparks definitely has a lot of playable cards, there just isn't a whole lot of top end. We're not getting new S-tier decks, and a lot of the best decks in the previous format have maybe 1 or 2 new cards in them. But Gastrodon has a chance to really shake things up, or do absolutely nothing, who knows. With the releases of Gravity Mountain and Gastrodon, there's clearly a war on Stage 2 Pokemon. If Gastrodon is on your bench, every Stage 2 Pokemon has its ability turned off. This is devastating for someone like Lugia V-Star who relies on Archeops to accelerate energy. In order to play around it, you'd have to boss the Gastrodon into the active spot, thus negating its ability. Barring that, your Stage 2 Pokemon will have to be in the active spot for their abilities to work. So Pidgeot EX has to be in the active to search the deck, Dusknoir has to be in the active to blow up, and Charizard EX has to be in the active to accelerate energy. At the very least, Gastrodon will force Stage 2 decks to play the game completely differently. And I honestly can't wait for all the rage quits on live when my opponent evolves into a bench Charizard EX and slowly comes to the realization that they made an oopsie. This is a tough call. When making a top 10 list for upcoming cards, I have to balance power and playability and also my own megalomaniac tendencies. Tera Orb, for instance, is extremely powerful. It's literally just Cherish Ball for Tera Pokemon, letting you get any Tera Pokemon from your deck for free, whereas something like Ultra Ball forces a discard of 2 cards. But Tera Orb can only get Tera Pokemon, while Ultra Ball can get any Pokemon. And basic EX decks don't really have a use for Tera Orb because of Nest Ball, unless you really want to increase your chances of hitting those basics. So that leaves it relegated to Stage 1 and Stage 2 decks, except it can't get the non-EX basics, whereas Ultra Ball can. So despite Tera Orb's amazing effect, it might never be more than a 1-of in decks like Dragapult and Charizard. Still, it deserves to be on the list even if its playability is a bit lower than others. The other option I had for the 9th spot was Counter Gain. It's crazy how little both Counter Gain and Counter Catcher were played during their initial releases. Fast forward to today, and partially because of Dusclops and Dusknoir, Counter Catcher is everywhere. And I expect Counter Gain to follow suit, though to a bit of a lesser extent. If you're behind on prizes, the attack cost of the Pokemon it's attached to is reduced by 1 colorless energy. So Terapagos EX and Slacking EX can attack for a single energy, Radiant Charizard can attack earlier, Hydreigon EX now only needs 3 energy instead of 4, and someone like Azelf can be put into a Dragapult deck to help clean up KOs. So here's something funny. If I went based on Japanese results after 1 week of Surging Sparks, the new Gimmighoul would deserve a place on this list. It's the best Gimmighoul in Standard right now, and pretty much every Japanese Gold and Go deck is playing it. But you don't want me to talk about a boring Gimmighoul. Instead, I'll put Eevee here. This one comes with a bit of an asterisk. Objectively, this Eevee card is amazing. As long as it's in the active spot, it can evolve right away. Plus, it's a colorless Pokemon, meaning it can take advantage of Glass Trumpet. So you can put any energy you want on this thing and evolve at turn 1 going first. The catch is that we don't know everything it's going to evolve into. The only evolutions we know about so far are Sylveon EX and Flareon EX. Sylveon in Surging Sparks is kinda meh. Angelite doesn't do damage, but it can annoy Stage 2 decks who've used all their rare candies, shuffling 2 of their Pokemon back into their deck. But on January 17th, we're getting Prismatic Evolution, a set expected to feature all the other evolutions. If any of them are good, this Eevee is an instant 4-of. Unfortunately, Flareon EX doesn't inspire confidence. Pokebeach posted the translation revealing that it does 130 for 2 energy and accelerates 2 energy, while its second attack does 280 damage for a Fire, Water, and Lightning. It honestly just seems like a worse Cinderace EX. Regardless, Eevee is good, we just have to hope at least one of the Eeveelutions is playable. Moving along to the Surging Sparks cards worth crafting, we're getting 8 Ace-Specs. And believe it or not, these could be the final Ace-Specs of the Scarlet and Violet era. 2025 will see the arrival of Trainers Pokemon, meaning our 2024 mechanic of Ace-Specs might be gone for good. Or they'll decide to extend it another year, who knows. Anyways, for those Ace-Specs, remember that they cost 600 credits each to craft in live, and you only need to own one of each. I've already talked about Brilliant Blender and Precious Trolley, 2 cards you should absolutely own. Then we get to the less important Ace-Specs. While Scramble Switch and Miracle Headset are both powerful, neither of them are in the top 5 best Ace-Specs. You should be thinking about Prime Catcher, Unfair Stamp, Hero's Tape, Maximum Belt, and more well before them. Still, Scramble Switch can be fun for decks with high HP that survive attacks, switching your active with a bench Pokemon and moving all the attached energy to that new active. And Miracle Headset grabs 2 supporters from your discard pile. But if it's turn 1 or 2 and you don't have a supporter in the discard, it's useless. Moving to Energy Search Pro and Enriching Energy, they're too niche to recommend. Energy Search definitely helps Goldengo ramp into a ton of damage, but Hyper Aroma is likely better in the long run. And Enriching Energy can be useful in decks that return energy to the hand or deck, but they're few and far between, like my cousin from Alabama's eyes. Megaton Blower is one of the strongest Pokemon cards ever printed, discarding every special energy and tool from your opponent's Pokemon plus a stadium in play. But with Lugia V-Star the only deck that mainlines special energy, it's not worth owning. And Amulet of Hope is far too easy to play around to suggest running. I've already talked about how good Counter Gain is, and since every trainer coming up is an uncommon or 100 credits each to craft, don't be afraid to own 4, but 2 will be enough for now. As for Cyrano, you only need 1. Any deck that has a use for finding 3 Pokemon EX won't need to do it more than once. And honestly, you might be better just Jocking off, because for something like Charizard EX, Jacques can also find Charmeleon, Dusclops, and Dusknoir, whereas Cyrano is stuck with EX Pokemon only. Both of the new stadiums and Surging Sparks are worth owning at least 2 copies of, including Gravity Mountain, which I've already talked about. Lively Stadium, meanwhile, boosts the hit points of basic Pokemon by 30. I'm not a huge fan of stadiums that don't get value on your turn, but in basic EX decks, it can maybe help you survive an extra turn. And in evolution decks, your low HP basics get 30 more hit points, giving them a better chance of surviving early. Then we have Tera Orb and Surfer, brah. As I said earlier, you really only need 1 copy of Tera Orb. For Surfer, the same holds true. While you could definitely chuck a playset into an Iron Valiant EX deck, it's just a good supporter that switches your active and draws you up to 5, helping you against Snorlax stall. Kieran might be better in certain situations, but craft 1 Surfer for 100 credits and you're good to go. Finally, Deduction Kit and Meddling Memo are 2 trainers you can own, but aren't entirely worth it. I personally think Deduction Kit is better than most people are expecting. Being able to rearrange the top 3 cards of your deck is great, and if all 3 of those cards suck, you can put them on the bottom of your deck. If you can find the space in your deck, it's worth owning 4. Meddling Memo, meanwhile, can be used with Xerosic Machinations and Grabber. Xerosic them down to 3 cards, they'll leave the best ones, and then use Memo to force them to put those cards on the bottom of their deck. Alternatively, you can use Grabber ahead of a Rotom attack to scope out their hand. If it doesn't have any good items, Memo them a new hand and try to hit something good there. Basically, Meddling Memo opens up a whole new world of possibilities for stall and control decks. As for the support Pokemon, I'll briefly mention the ones I've already talked about. You want a 2-2 line of Magneton for 280 credits, 1 Latias EX for 600 credits, and a 1-1 line of Gastrodon for 440 credits. Looking at the new Gimmighoul and the busted evolution Eevee, get 4 copies of each. Since they're commons, it's only 160 credits for a playset of each. Switching to the other support Pokemon, we have Togekiss with its Wonder Kiss ability. Whenever your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out, a coin is flipped. If it's heads, you take 1 more prize card. So if you take a knockout through damage, or an effect of an attack, or during checkup with poison or burn, or even if they blow up a Dusclops or Dusknoir while it's in their active spot, Togekiss always gives you a chance to gain an extra prize. Since Wonder Kiss doesn't stack, 1 copy of 400 credits is enough. And don't bother crafting the new Togepi or Togetic on the left side. Either of the old ones on the right are much better. Because it's an uncommon, I can recommend crafting 4 Victini for a total of 400 credits. With Victini in play, all of your Evolution Fire Pokemon deal 10 extra damage. Since it stacks, 4 Victini equals plus 40 damage. There's surprisingly few good evolution fire types right now, but it can help Incineroar EX, Breaksin, Cinderace EX, and to a lesser degree, Ceruledge EX. For the final support Pokemon you want to craft, we have the baby Terapagos. Yes, it technically attacked, but the attack is designed to support, so I'm putting it here. For a single colorless energy, Prism Charge accelerates 3 energy of different types to your Tera Pokemon however you want. While it works on evolution Tera Pokemon, the best use is with basic Tera Pokemon. This way you can easily power up Pikachu, Terapagos, Lapras, Totsadiri, or any of the Ogerpon turn 1 going second. And getting Terapagos into the active won't be difficult if you run Latias EX. So if you're planning on trying out a terrible basic Tera Pokemon like Totsadiri, definitely craft 1 copy of Terapagos before subjecting yourself to the misery of playing a Totsadiri deck. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for. No, Pokemon TCG Pocket doesn't have trading, it's the attacking Pokemon in Surging Sparks. Quickly summarizing the attackers I've already featured, you want 3 Ceruledge EX. Having 4 copies of an EX Pokemon isn't terrible, but 3 is more than enough to get by, so set aside 1800 credits. And make sure you also craft 4 copies of the new 70 hit point Charcadet. It's nothing special, it's just the best Charcadet out there. While some Miraidon decks are only playing 1 or 2 Pikachu EX, you still want to craft 3 for 1800 credits, as the Blissey variant wants 3. But you only need 1 Rotom. And the Pokemon Company made Rotom a common because they wanted as many people as possible to have access to it because they hate us and our tears fill the water jugs at their offices. There's plenty of other attacking Pokemon you want to own with Surging Sparks, just don't be surprised if winning ends up being tougher than you'd hoped. Let's start with Hydreigon EX and Charcadet EX. Both of these EXs have a chance to do things in Standard, and you want 3 of each. I'll cover them more in depth in my new decks video, but with Hydreigon, its first attack does 200 damage and discards the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. I think that's where you should be focusing most of your attention, as it can be powered up by Dark Patch and have its attack cost reduced with Counter Gain. Should you want to attack with Obsidian though, you'll need Counter Gain, Neo Upper Energy, and a Darkness Energy to deal 130 to the active and 130 to 2 bench Pokemon. Don't get me wrong, Obsidian is a great attack, you just won't be launching it every single turn. You'll also want 4 of the new Dino and 1's Vilas. For Charcadet EX, ignore the new Duraludon. Just use 4 of the old one from Stellar Crown because you'll be pairing this guy with Relicanth to copy Raging Hammer. While Charcadet only deals 220 damage, Metal Defender removes its fire weakness. Plus, it's a stage 1 with 300 hit points, and its ability allows you to accelerate 2 Metal Energy upon evolving, making it a good overall card. Get 3 Charcadet, hope it survives a hit, then whack people with your hammer for big damage the next turn. The final Pokemon EX you should be crafting from Surging Sparks is my Milotic EX. I know, it's a stall card, but it's been performing well in Japan. Get 2 and run it with the old Feebas with Ascension. While Milotic won't win any damage contests, 160 in sleep can potentially be annoying. But you're running it for the ability, which makes it immune to attacks from Tera Pokemon. Pair it with Mimikyu, Ogerpon, Noivern, and Ferreiraraf, and now you have another Pokemon that can wall some of the top decks out there. Koraidon could have been included in my top 10, that's how strong it is. If one of your other ancient Pokemon attacked during your last turn, even if it's another Koraidon, Unrelenting Onslaught deals 180 damage for 2 colorless energy. That's good on its own for any ancient deck running Professor Sada. Add in the fact that it's a fighting type, now you can one-shot Terapagos EX easily. Get yourself 4 Koraidon for 400 credits, put them into any of your ancient decks, and now you have a great one-prize attacker. Featuring a similar attack to Altaria from Silver Tempest, the new Fluttermane moves all damage counters from one of your benched ancient Pokemon to your opponent's active. It pairs really well with Raging Bolt EX and Roaring Moon EX, who can have up to 300 hit points with Ancient Booster, essentially forcing your opponent to take 1-hit KOs or pay the price. While far less playable than Koraidon, it does give you a single prizer who can not only heal a big ancient Pokemon, but also heavily damage somebody else. Azumarill is a perfect budget rogue deck. As long as you have a Tera Pokemon in play, it does 230 damage for 1 Psychic Energy. The only downside is that it puts 50 damage on itself, though with just 120 hit points it was never going to survive long anyways. It's an uncommon, so getting 4 is just 400 credits. And ignore the Psychic Marill. Make sure you have either of the old Water Marill in the deck, as they both have 70 hit points and a 1 retreat cost. You want 1 Azelf. At first it might seem like a worse Mimikyu. They both have 70 hit points and they both deal damage based on the number of damage counters on all of your opponent's Pokemon, and they both can take advantage of Counter Gain to attack for a single Psychic Energy. But Azelf does 10 plus, while Mimikyu does 10 times. Yeah, okay, Mimikyu's better. But Mimikyu rotates in March and Azelf doesn't, so get one and put it into your Dragapult deck. And that's it for the cards I can recommend crafting from Surging Sparks when it's out on November 7th. The only other ones to mention are Slacking EX, which you'd want 3 of, Tapu Koko, which could be a decent 1 of in Lightning decks, and Rabska and Wo-Chien, which help make up a potential road deck in the new format. In total, you'll want roughly 14,000 credits to craft every playable card in the set. Of course, you can cut out something you have no plans to play like Milotic EX to save 1,200, and the 2 free decks on the Surging Sparks Battle Pass will include some of these cards as well, further driving down the cost. As always, I'll have an updated crafting guide in my Battle Pass free decks video, which should release on October 31st or November 1st. I wouldn't be surprised if Pikachu EX and Hydreigon EX are the 2 choices, but we'll have to wait until then to know for sure. If you think I missed any cards, or if you have any ideas on how to make my feet smoother, let everyone know in the comments.